لا تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So carrying on then from where we left off in Al-Aqeedah Al-Wasitiyyah, we got to the statement of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala when he quotes this next ayah, وَقَوْلُهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وغضب الله عليه ولعنه وأعد له عذابا عظيما. That whomsoever kills a believer with intent, then his recompense is the hellfire, and he will remain therein forever. And Allah's anger is upon him, and the curse of Allah is upon him, and Allah has prepared for him a severe punishment. This ayah, it mentions someone who commits the act of killing. وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا. And in particular, it mentions the one who kills a believer, muta'ammidan, on purpose, with intent, that the person does something whereby it is overwhelmingly considered that this act would lead to the death of that other individual. So he has killed him on purpose. فَجَزَاؤُهُ. So then his recompense will be that he is in the hellfire. That killer will be in the hellfire. فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ. And then it mentions خَالِدًا فِيهَا, which could mean he will remain therein forever. خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His anger is upon that individual, and His curse is upon that individual. And the curse of Allah meaning that the individual is distanced and removed from the mercy of Allah. That is the la'nah of Allah upon a person, that the person is distanced and removed from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ayah highlights a severe sin, the sin of killing an innocent believer. The sin of killing an innocent believer. And the ayah seems to indicate that the one who does this action will remain in the hellfire forever. But we know that generally the rule is that those who remain in the hellfire forever will only be the kuffar, the mushrikun. Here though, it's talking about the sin of killing someone, which is not shirk in terms of the shirk of associating partners alongside Allah, etc. It is not like that, the act of killing. Yet the ayah seems to indicate that the one who does this action will be in the hellfire forever. In regards to that, there are some narrations from some of the Salaf that seem to indicate that too. There are some narrations from some of the Salaf that may indicate that also. So for example, يروى عن ابن عباس أنه قال قاتل المؤمن متعمدا لا تقبل له توبة. That the one who kills a believer on purpose with intent, then his tawbah will not be accepted. ويقول, and he also mentioned, هذه الآية من آخر ما نزل ولم ينسخها شيء. That this ayah is from the last of the revelation that came, and there is nothing that abrogates it. وَمِمَّنْ ذَهَبَ إِلَىٰ قَوْلِهِ, and others from the Salaf who also took this opinion and this stance that Ibn Abbas took, Zayd ibn Thabit, wa Abu Hurraira, wa Abu Salama ibn Abd al-Rahman, wa Ubayd ibn Umair, wal Hasan, wa Qatada, wa Dhahak. They are from amongst those who took this stance and this position that the one who kills a believer on purpose with intent, then there is no tawbah accepted from that killer. However, وَالَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْجُمْهُورِ, that which the majority of the scholars have said about this is salafan wa khalafan, from the early ones and from the later ones, from amongst the scholars and Ahlul Ilm. What they have said is أن القاتل له توبة فيما بينه وبين الله, that the killer, the one who kills a believer with intent on purpose, does have a tawbah that can be accepted between him and Allah. He can repent and there is tawbah for him between him and Allah. فَإِن تَابَ وَأَنَابَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا بَدَّلَ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِ حَسَنَاتٍ وَعَوَّضَ الْمَقْتُولَ عَنْ ظَلَامَتِهِ. So if that person who killed a believer on purpose, if that person repents and that person returns back to Allah in subservience and does the righteous actions, then Allah changes and swaps his evil deeds for good ones and gives a compensation, compensates for the murdered one. The murdered one, he will be compensated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will compensate him. And the one who murdered him, if he repents sincerely, then between him and Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may accept his tawbah. And that is in line with the evidences of the Sunnah, of the Quran and the Sunnah generally. In the Quran, for example, Allah says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all of the sins. Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Allah forgives all of the sins, including the sin of murder, including the sin of murdering a believer. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bih, wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive that you associate partners alongside Him, that you commit shirk, but He forgives all else to whom He wills. All else, including the action of killing a believer. That would come under the generality of the ayah. All else can be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فهذه الآية عامة في جميع الذنوب عدا الشرك بالله إلى غير ذلك من الأدلة. So this ayah and the previous ayah, they are both general in including all of the sins, including killing a believer. So the general principles of the religion would seem to indicate that the one who kills a believer on purpose can still repent from that, and his tawbah can still be accepted, and therefore he would not be in the hellfire forever. So then how would we explain the statement of Ibn Abbas and the others who took that position? One of the ways of explaining that statement, as some of the scholars have mentioned generally about the Salaf, is that the Salaf would sometimes give the extreme example of something, even if the actual affair was slightly less in degree. They would give the evidences and the positions and the statements that are of the highest degree of severity, even if something was of a slightly lower degree of severity. Why? To indicate how evil that action is and where it can lead to. So perhaps when Ibn Abbas and the others made that statement, it was due to trying to indicate to the people the level of severity, rather than the actual point of saying that they will be in the hellfire forever. فما يروى عن ابن عباس وغيره فهو مبالغة وتشديد في الزجر عن القتل. So that is to show the severity of the action. That Ibn Abbas said there's gonna be no tawbah for the one who does that. Not meaning that in reality he cannot be forgiven, he will be in the hellfire forever, but perhaps it was in order to indicate the severity of that action that he made that severe statement regarding it. قال ابن القيم رحمه الله تعالى: والتحقيق في المسألة أن القتل تتعلق به ثلاثة حقوق. Ibn al-Qayyim said, when you analyze this affair, the affair of killing a believer with intent on purpose, in that affair there are three rights that are involved. There are three rights that are involved. حق الله وحق المقتول وحق الولي. The right of Allah, because by killing a believer on purpose, you have now sinned against Allah. It is a sin to do that. That is a right of Allah in the affair that you have transgressed. And also حق المقتول, obviously, as well. the one who has been killed, you have taken his right by killing him as an innocent individual who you had no right to kill. وَحَقُّ الْوَلِي, and the next of kin of that person who was killed has a right in the affair. So Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned there are these three rights involved in that situation when somebody has killed a believer on purpose. Then he says, Ibn al-Qayyim, فَإِذَا سَلِمَ الْقَاتِلُ نَفْسَهُ أو سلم القاتل نفسه طوعا واختيارا ندما على ما فعله وخوفا من الله وتوبة نصوحا سقط حق الله بالتوبة. So if that killer gives himself up and hands himself in and regrets what he did and sincerely repents from his actions, gives himself up, hands himself in and regrets what he did and makes a sincere repentance, then in that case, in terms of the right of Allah, that has been taken care of in that affair, then Allah will forgive that person then. So the right of Allah is covered in that affair there. If he repents sincerely and regrets what he did and hands himself in, then the right of Allah is now dropped. The right of Allah is now covered in his sincere tawbah. وحق الأولياء بالاستيفاء أو الصلح أو العفو. As for the next of kin, then we know that right can be taken care of also in different ways. Either the next of kin may just forgive you, so that's the right taken care of. He forgives you, the next of kin forgives the killer. So that's his right now covered. Or maybe the next of kin accepts the blood money, so his right is covered. And even if the next of kin insists on the person being killed, then that also covers now his right. So the right of the next of kin can be covered. وَبَقِيَ حَقُّ الْمَقْتُولِ. So the only right that now remains is the right of the actual one who was killed. The one who was actually killed. بَقِيَ حَقُّ الْمَقْتُولِ يعوضه الله عنه يوم القيامة عن عبده التائب المحسن ويصلح بينه وبينه. Then it is mentioned, Ibn al-Qayyim says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will compensate that individual who was killed unlawfully, innocent. Allah will compensate him on the Day of Judgment from the one who had killed him. Justice will be done between them and the rights will be returned and the correction will be made between them. So then the right of the one who was killed taken care of. فَلَا يَضِيعُ حَقُّ هَذَا وَلَا يُبْطِلْ حَقَّ هَذَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow anyone's right to be lost and neither for anybody's right to be nullified or finished off. Rather, everybody in that situation, they are all returned with their rights. This would therefore, Ibn al-Qayyim's statement there, it indicates that the one who did the killing can therefore be forgiven in the end, because the rights, the three rights involved can all be covered. The right of Allah, he repents sincerely. The right of the next of kin via the blood money or the forgiveness, etc. And the right of the one who was killed on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the correction is made between them. So the rights are returned and the killer could therefore now be forgiven. وَبِتَقْدِيرِ دُخُولِ الْقَاتِلِ النَّارِ فليس بمخلد فيها أبدا بل الخلود هو المكث الطويل. So in this case, and upon the generalities of the Quran and the Sunnah, the general evidences, it would therefore indicate that the one who kills a believer on purpose, he may end up in the hellfire to be punished for that, but that his punishment would not be eternal in the hellfire. It would be a lengthy stay. That's what it can mean, مخلد or خالدا فيها, that he will be in there with a lengthy punishment, a lengthy stay in the hellfire. المكث الطويل. وقد تواترت الأحاديث عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And there are many other narrations in the Sunnah that would back up this position also. Many narrations that have been narrated by multiple companions in the chains of narration. From amongst them, when the Prophet ﷺ said, أنه يخرج من النار من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من إيمان, that they will exit from the fire the ones who had even, as they say in the English, an atom's weight of Iman in his heart. Meaning the one who had even a tiny amount of Iman in his heart, then eventually they will exit from the fire. And so if a Muslim killed another believer on purpose, that Muslim hasn't now lost all of his Iman, he has something. And the narration mentions someone even with the tiniest amount of Iman in the end will exit from the hellfire and enter paradise. And so it should be understood that entering the hellfire, it is of different types. There is of course the absolute entry into the hellfire, and that is the entrance of the mushrikun and the kuffar, who will absolutely be in there and remain in there forever. That is one type of entrance into the hellfire. دخول المشركين والكفرة فهؤلاء يدخلونها ولا يخرجون منها أبدا. They enter the fire and they will not exit from it at all. But then there is another type of entrance into the hellfire. دخول الموحدين, the people of Tawheed. Some of them may end up in the hellfire initially due to their sins. A person may be upon Tawheed and Iman but falls into sins. And so some of them who are upon Tawheed and Iman, because of the sins that they ended up committing, they may end up in the hellfire initially. فدخول الموحدين الذين عليهم ذنوب ومعاصي فهؤلاء يعذبون فيها بقدر سيئاتهم. So those believers will be punished in the fire in accordance to the level of their sins. ثم يخرجون منها, and after that is done, they have been punished in accordance to the level of their sins. They will then exit from the hellfire. إن لم يحصل سبب للخروج منها قبل ذلك. And that is only if nothing else has happened already to keep them out of the hellfire. Meaning, there may be some believers who have committed sins, and those sins mean that they are deserving to go into the hellfire. But on the day of judgment, due to various different things, like the shafa'ah that will occur on the day of judgment, and the mercy of Allah, and various affairs on the day of judgment that may expiate from them some of these sins, they may never actually end up therefore in the hellfire, even though initially because of their sins they were deserving of the hellfire. But due to the shafa'ah and other affairs that occur on the day of judgment, maybe some of them will not enter the hellfire. They will be expiated via the shafa'ah and other affairs. So he says, if that doesn't happen for some of them, their intercession and other affairs doesn't expiate their sins and they do end up in the hellfire, then it will only be temporary and they will be punished in accordance to the level of their sins, and then after that they will exit. فالناس ينقسمون بحسب ما تقدم إلى ثلاثة أقسام. So now then, people generally can be split up into three categories in relation to what their position will be on that day. Three categories generally in relation to what their position will be on that day. الأول المشركون الكفار، كفر يخرج عن الملة الإسلامية، فهؤلاء يدخلون النار ويخلدون فيها دائما ولا يخرجون منها أبدا. The first category are the mushrikun, the disbelievers, those who have committed kufr and shirk that exits them or maintains them outside of the fold of Islam. They will enter the hellfire and they will remain therein forever. النوع الثاني, the second type, من مات على التوحيد وليس عليه ذنوب فهذا يدخل الجنة من أول وهلة. The second type are the people of Tawheed who do not have sins upon them such that they would therefore be deserving of the hellfire. They don't have those sins upon them. People of Tawheed who do not have sins upon them which would require them to go to the hellfire. So if that's the case, where are they going to go? Instantly to paradise. People of Tawheed who do not have sins upon them such that they need to be punished for them, then they will instantly go to paradise from the start. The third category, الثالث, من مات موحدا وعليه ذنوب ومعاصي فهذا تحت مشيئة الله. The third category is therefore the believers, the people of Tawheed who do have sins such that they are deserving to be initially punished. That category of people, what is the ruling on them? That they are تحت مشيئة الله. They are under the will of Allah on that day. إن شاء عفا عنه وأدخله الجنة من أول وهلة. If Allah wills, some of those people of Tawheed who have sins such that they are deserving to be punished upon them initially and then exited from the hellfire, Allah may just forgive them and they are not punished, they still go to paradise instantly. Some of those, Allah may just forgive them and they go to paradise from the start. وَإِنْ شَاءَ عَذَّبَهُ بِقَدَرِ ذُنُوبِهِ ثُمَّ أَدْخَلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. And if Allah wills, amongst them there may be those who are punished for their level of sins, and then after that they are taken out of hellfire and placed into paradise. هذا ما عليه أهل السنة والجماعة وهو الذي تواترت به الأدلة من الكتاب والسنة عكس ما عليه المرجئة والخوارج والمعتزلة. This is the correct understanding that Ahlus Sunnah are upon, contrary to what the people of innovation like the Mu'tazila, the Murji'ah, the Khawarij are upon. So Ahlus Sunnah, we say there will be people who are deserving of the hellfire forever and they enter and remain forever. They are the mushrikun, the kuffar. Then there are those who are upon Tawheed and no sins upon them to be punished upon. They will enter paradise instantly. And then there are those people of Tawheed who do have sins upon them deserving to be punished. They are tahta mashi'atillah, under the will of Allah on that day. Maybe Allah will just forgive whomsoever He wishes to forgive and they'll enter paradise straight away. And maybe Allah will punish whomsoever He wills to punish, and they'll be punished in accordance to the level of their sins, and then they'll be taken out and placed into paradise also. Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen mentioned some points here as well, some additional benefits in this regard. He says in this ayah then, it mentions that the punishment of the one who kills a believer on purpose is hellfire forever, and that the curse of Allah is upon that individual. You notice here, he says that there are multiple punishments mentioned for the one who does this action. It mentions the punishment of that person being in Jahannam. It mentions the punishment of that person being there forever. And as we have now understood, that will mean not forever, but for a long period of time of punishment. Thirdly, it mentions وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ, that Allah's anger is upon that person. وَلَعَنَهُ, the fourth thing, Allah's curse is upon that person. And أَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا, the fifth thing, that Allah has prepared for them a severe punishment. 5 affairs of punishment are mentioned upon the one who kills a believer, an innocent believer, on purpose with intent. As Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen says, even if just one of those punishments was mentioned for this sin, it would be enough for a person to want to stay away from it. Even if just one of those punishments was mentioned, but 5 are mentioned: hellfire, lengthy punishment in the hellfire, the anger of Allah, the curse of Allah, and a severe torment prepared for them. So how do we understand this issue of khalidan fiha? We've already explained over there, but some additional points from Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen, some opinions of the scholars on how they explained khalidan fiha, that the killer will be in the fire forever. We've mentioned some general evidences from the Sunnah and the Quran to highlight that only a mushrik stays in the hellfire forever. But here are some more. Some of the scholars, they said that maybe this ayah is talking about a situation where a kafir kills a believer on purpose. Then it would make sense, because the kafir is going to be in the hellfire forever. So some of them said maybe this ayah is talking about a situation where it is a kafir who kills a believer on purpose, and that's why it says the kafir will be in the hellfire forever. But why is this opinion not really a very strong opinion regarding the tafsir of this ayah? Because a kafir is already going to be in the hellfire forever anyway, even if he doesn't kill a believer on purpose. A kafir, even if he never commits murder in his life, a kafir who dies upon kufr will be in the hellfire forever. So then the other scholars, they said that doesn't really give us any real meaning here. It doesn't really give a good tafsir. A kafir who kills a believer will be in the hellfire forever. We already know that. A kafir, even if he doesn't kill a believer on purpose, will be in the hellfire forever. So many of the scholars said that's not really a good interpretation. Another interpretation, or another opinion some scholars mentioned, is that maybe this is a Muslim who killed another innocent Muslim or believer on purpose, but this Muslim, the killer, the murderer, made istihlal of the act of killing. Because remember, there's a difference between someone doing a sin but knowing it is a sin, compared to someone who does a sin and believes it to be halal, declares it to be halal. So they said maybe this is about someone who declares the blood of the believer to be halal. And we know that Allah has made that haram. So they said maybe it is that. أن هذا في من استحل القتل. But then in that case, if a believer declares this act of killing another believer to be halal, makes istihlal of this affair, by doing so he becomes a kafir anyway. So then we're back to the first opinion. If he makes that istihlal, even if he doesn't go and kill a believer, just the very fact that he makes istihlal of this affair is enough to declare him to be upon kufr. So again, that wouldn't make a good interpretation. If he's making istihlal of the affair, then he's in the hellfire forever as a kafir anyway, even if he kills a believer or not. Al-Imam Ahmad said, or it is mentioned, عجب الإمام أحمد من هذا الجواب قال كيف هذا إذا استحل قتله فهو كافر وإن لم يقتله وهو مخلد في النار وإن لم يقتله. Al-Imam Ahmad said this answer doesn't really work properly. That the person makes istihlal of killing the believers, makes it halal to take the blood of an innocent believer. Because if a believer did that istihlal, was upon that belief, then that in and of itself is kufr, kafir. So he'll be in the hellfire forever, whether he actually goes and kills a believer or not. So again, this second interpretation or explanation may not be a strong one. The third possible explanation is that this is a sabab. A person who kills a believer, who kills another innocent believer on purpose, then that is a reason, it is a cause for the killer to enter hellfire. But we know Islamically, something can be a sabab, but that does not necessitate that the result of the sabab will always happen. Something can be a reason or a cause for something, but that doesn't always mean that the end result will always happen. You could do that sabab, but will you achieve what the sabab is supposed to achieve for you? Maybe sometimes you will, maybe sometimes you won't. You can do the sabab, but you may not end up with the goal that you are looking for, what you are trying to achieve. It's like Ibn al-Qayyim, he mentioned it about certain affairs in regards to people becoming sick with disease. Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned a person may be sick and another person, other people in his family, for example, some of them may also become sick due to the contagion that Allah decrees. But some of them don't. All of his family in the same house, one of them becomes sick with a contagious disease. Some of the family members, Allah decrees that they also become sick through mixing with that sick one. But some of the family members mixing with him just like other family members, but they don't become sick. Allah doesn't decree upon them that contagion. So now Ibn al-Qayyim said, the sabab is it there. The person is sick with a disease and the family are all mixing with him, intermingling with that sick person and going to him and sitting with him and maybe rubbing his head and doing other things. The sabab for the contagion is there. But some of them by the decree of Allah got it, some of them by the decree of Allah didn't. Meaning Ibn al-Qayyim said the sabab can be there, the mixing between the healthy and the sick, but that does not necessitate that all of the healthy are now going to end up sick. The sabab is there, but the end result did not occur for some of them. And that can be due to certain reasons. That some of them did not become sick and others did. Allah decreed it for some, didn't decree it upon others. It can be for certain reasons. It could be due to the taqwa of those others that Allah did not decree the illness upon. It could be due to certain other good deeds and salihat that those people have been doing, such that Allah then didn't decree the illness upon them. It could be the dua and the supplication those others have been making more than these, and so Allah didn't decree it upon them. So the sabab was there for all of them, the whole family. They're all mixing with this sick person, they're all going there, meeting with him, drinking with him. They're all there. The sabab is there for all of them. But for some of them, the result comes out of it. They also end up becoming sick by the decree of Allah. Some of them do not. And so the sabab was there, but the end result was not. They mixed with the sick person who has a contagious disease, but they didn't become sick. So Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned a sabab can be there, but not always does it necessitate that the end result will be there. That is by the decree of Allah. You may take a sabab for something, you do that, you put your trust in Allah, and maybe it comes out good, maybe it doesn't work, even though you took the sabab. So here they said upon this opinion, this third opinion, that this is a sabab. If you kill a believer on purpose, you have done the sabab, which should have the end result of you being in the hellfire forever. But does it necessitate that the end result of the sabab always occurs? No, it doesn't, like we've just said. It doesn't necessitate that. So they said, هذا sabab, this is a reason. But sometimes a sabab, a reason, a cause can occur, but there may be some type of mani', some type of preventative factor that prevents the sabab from having its impact. لم ينفذ السبب كما نقول القرابة سبب. Here's an example. The Shaykh says, your next of kin, your children, etc., they have the right when you die to inherit from you. Inheritance. Your children, etc., the next of kin, they have the right to inherit from you. So what is the sabab here? The sabab is that they are related to you by blood. That blood connection is a sabab. Your child is now, has the right to inherit from you. That sabab is there because he is your blood. However, sometimes something might happen such that the sabab cannot be implemented. For example, if your next of kin, that relative, was a slave, then some other fiqh issues start coming into it about inheritance and things. If he was a slave, or if your next of kin was a non-Muslim, so then the sabab isn't going to be implemented. So the Shaykh said, sometimes you can have a sabab, but there may be other reasons that come into it that stop the sabab from having its effect. فنقول, so he says, هذا الفعل سبب للخلود في النار. So that action of killing a believer is a reasoning, a cause, the sabab for someone to stay in the hellfire forever. نعم فهذا الفعل سبب للخلود وإذا كان الفاعل مؤمنا فلا يخلد في النار. However, if the one who does this sabab is a believer, now we have something to prevent the sabab from being implemented. What do we have? The iman of that person. And we know in the Quran and the Sunnah, somebody with iman does not stay in the hellfire forever. So that now is a mani'. It is something preventing this sabab to have its full end result. Normally it would be the full end result of staying in the hellfire forever if you kill a believer on purpose. But now the one who did it is a believer himself. He has iman. So now the sabab cannot be implemented fully, because we know in the texts of the Quran and the Sunnah, somebody with iman cannot stay in the hellfire forever. Therefore the sabab is there. His action was deserving to be in the hellfire forever. But now this iman is a prevention from that sabab being fully implemented, because a believer does not stay in the hellfire forever. What do you think of this explanation? It really goes back to all the others. Scholars again have said it's not a very strong explanation. They again have said this is not from the strongest of explanations. Naqul, because if a believer does this action, then we know that this punishment will not be implemented to that level. A believer will never stay in the hellfire forever. So then if that's the case, how is this ayah a threat to a believer? The ayah therefore doesn't apply fully to a believer. They said, how can that be then? That's not a good tafsir. The ayah has a severe threat in it, hellfire forever. But now you're telling us actually it doesn't mean that if you're a believer. So now they say the tafsir isn't that good. You're downgrading the ayah. If it's a believer, now the threat is no longer even there. So what's the point of this threat to a believer? Then a believer doesn't even apply to him. So a believer is going to go kill. He's going to say this doesn't apply to me. So again they say it's not a strong evidence or a strong opinion regarding what the meaning of it is. The next explanation is the strongest of them, which is that the meaning of this خالدا فيها أن المراد بالخلود المكث الطويل, that the intent of this ayah is that a person will remain therein for a long time, not forever, but a long time. وَلَيْسَ الْمُرَادُ بِهِ الْمُكْثَ الدَّائِمِ, and the meaning is not staying in there forever. لأن اللغة العربية يطلق فيها الخلود على المكث الطويل. Linguistically in Arabic, you can say al-khulud, like we say forever, to mean something which is a long time, but not necessarily actually forever. And that's possible in the Arabic language. You say, for example, فلان خالد في الحبس, والحبس ليس بدائم. ويقولون فلان خالد خلود الجبال, ومعلوم أن الجبال ينصفها ربي نسفا فيذرها قاعا صفصفا. It's like in the Arabic language they say such and such is stuck in some place forever, like the mountains are. A mountain, does it ever move, ever go anywhere? A mountain stays in its place, it doesn't go anywhere. So they say in Arabic somebody is stuck somewhere like a mountain. Forever meaning forever. Mountain never moves, stuck in that one place forever. But even that we know, on the day of judgment, the mountains will even crumble and go away from their places. So even that isn't forever. So linguistically in Arabic, it can have that meaning. And this is what the scholars have said, that the intent here would be that it is a long punishment in the hellfire, but that it would not be a punishment forever in the hellfire. And that is, as we said at the beginning of the lesson, those other ayat and narrations highlight how the believer does not stay in the hellfire forever. The point of this ayah then in regards to the names and attributes of Allah was to highlight what? وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. The one who does this, Allah is angered upon him, affirming the attribute of anger for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we'll have to round off today. We'll go into more detail on this particular attribute from next time, inshaAllah ta'ala. But we'll have to conclude on that for now then. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.